Hello fish fools, Jeff here. So we're looking at my 40-gallon planted live bear community tank. And I just did a water change, and now after doing that, the light is shining through better because almost the entire surface was covered with Ricciafluitans. So when I did the water change, I filled it up beyond where I would usually stop so that the hang on the back filter could push water across the top. So like, usually I will leave a little bit of a gap here before it reaches this lid. Once it, I'll fill it up, and maybe once the first notice water touching this is when I'll stop, but I went a little beyond, so it's like really right up there. But yeah, but that did what I wanted it to do, to have water flow across the top. And so with that, the plants are pretty messy. It already was overgrown with Java moss and, well, with the Ricciafluitans across the top, but now there's like little shreds of Ricciafluitans all over the place. Loose Anacra stems that were floating, just pushed down from the water flow. But yeah, still, it's looking cool. And, well, compared to how it was before the water change, it's brighter to look at the fish now that light can get through. Yeah, so I thought I'd talk about this aquarium today because it just happens to be 6 years ago that I got my first fish upon getting back into the aquarium hobby. I mean, I had fish when I was a kid, and then many years passed without having any aquariums set up or fish tanks, and then I decided to get fish again. And this was when I was living in my apartment before I moved into my house. And that's part of the reason that I held off getting any fish, because I knew at some point I was going to move, and I didn't want to get too involved with setting up a tank and moving. But then I decided to just get started anyway. And I remember at the time just watching different YouTube videos and getting kind of fired up about getting a tank, and I just decided, okay, I'll do that. I thought maybe I'd just get a 10-gallon for the time being. But then I ended up settling on a 30-gallon for my first tank in my apartment. I kind of figured that might be the kind of a semi-big tank, but not too big for moving purposes when that time would come. So that time, 6 years ago, I had the 30-gallon set up as I was cycling it. So I already had plants. A couple, almost 2 weeks ago, I submitted a community post where I pointed out that the first live plant that I ever got was an Anubias, and that is it there. So it had maybe 5 leaves or so when I first got it from a tube at Petco, or PetSmart actually, I think. And from that it grew into this, and I propagated it. So from my first live plant, the Anubias there, and propagated that here in my 29-gallon swordtail community tank. And also in here in my 6-foot 84-gallon community display tank. And not just that, I even clipped off a piece that is in my friend's daughter's aquarium in Massachusetts on the other side of the country. Yeah, so that was my first plant. And the very first plant, I remember having the 30-gallon set up, and it was just that Anubias alone. And then a few days later, I got a few more plants, which included Java Fern. So some of this is from the original Java Fern. And I also had a Amazon sword, which was in the back corner of this tank. That did die off, but that was the first plant that I noticed any growth from. I remember seeing a little leaf growing up from it at the time and just being excited about that before I even had fish. And I had also had a water wisteria stem plant. That original wisteria plant had died off, but so had plants in here before I had any fish, and then as this was cycling, but then I had at the same time I set up a 10-gallon tank to use as a quarantine tank that I could decided just even from the first time getting fish, a quarantine process where some of the quarantine med packets were 1 packet per 10 gallons. So in that the first fish that I got, the first fish I ever quarantined, included descendant or one of the ancestors of this Marigold Variatus Platy. So 6 years ago, from PetSmart, I bought a pair of those, a male and a female, and also a female blue guppy. It was the very first fish I had. So from then, here we are 6 years later, and still have one original descendant. There are likely some that are some genes, but that's the only one that is still a pure Marigold Variatus Platy. And as old as she is, that male is trying to mate with her. I think she is probably around 4 years old. It was actually 1 year ago, I made a video where I spotlighted her, that she was the last of her kind from the first fish that I got at the time 5 years ago, and I would not have expected her to still be alive a year later. So yeah, I figure she's about 4 years old because I moved over 2 years ago, and before that, in my 30-gallon, where I had, her ancestors and where she was born, and that 30-gallon, after maybe 3 years in, since I first set it up, started leaking. And from there, I kind of didn't take care of it as much. I mean, it had a slow leak, and I just didn't really know what to do with it, and I would still do water changes, but if I filled it to the top, it would leak, but then it would kind of, from the top, if it would leak and reach to about here, then it would just stop leaking. So I let it kind of do that and had an aquarium below so the water would kind of pour into. But from there, and that's how I kind of figured that she's about 4 years old, because at the time I wasn't seeing fry growing up. So she was still one of the adults from that point on that was about a year old to that point. And this is now, from then until now, from the time that was leaking, 3 years later. So yeah, that's about it's a pretty old fish. Old for a platy or a Xiphophorus genus. It's Xiphophorus Variatus. Very similar to Xiphophorus maculatus, like a regular platy, which they can interbreed. So yeah, that's the last of those. What kind of sucks is that I haven't seen them sold at PetSmarts anymore. I remember then I would still see them at PetSmarts, but you know, I had plenty of them. I had babies, the original parents, and you know, I had a bunch of them in the 30-gallon, and I didn't think I'd end up at a point where I'd have one left. I have seen some along the way, but they were sold as like high fins. I haven't seen any just regular, and I really don't want high fins. I don't want to, and that's kind of a little more exotic, but I just much prefer regular fins, and I wouldn't want to mix any high fins in here, because I mean, I like different strains, and I like them to mix and create mutts, as most of them are in here. But I wouldn't want any hyphen mutts in the mix. So, yeah. So 6 years ago, from then until now, back then, when I was first getting into the aquarium hobby, I had a plan. What I had in mind, when I was a kid, I didn't have any plants. It was just like fake plants. I didn't know anything about live plants, but I had platies and corridors and tetras, so that's what I liked. So what I had envisioned was setting up that 30-gallon as I did, with platies, guppies, neon tetras, and corridors, and I settled on Julii corridors. Not these same ones, but I think I peaked at having 7 at that time in the 30-gallon, and now I think I have at least 7 in here. I know there's 7, there could be more if they had babies, but I know that at least 4 of them were born in here, because I did have only 3 for sure. I knew that. And then some, I never saw the eggs, I never saw them spawning, but then saw some youngsters, and yeah, now there's 7 of them. Back when I had my 30-gallon, didn't see any of they didn't breed, or not that I know of. Yeah, so what happened to that 30-gallon? Because this is a 40-gallon. When I moved, after I moved, I upgraded it. If you're familiar with this channel, if you go back when I first started, the early years of this channel, I was showing that 30-gallon a lot. But since it leaked, and after I moved, I haven't really done anything with it. But I will show you what has become of it. So here it is outside. When I moved, this is where I just put it out here, because it leaks. When I do water changes, I just dump the water in here, because there's duckweed that's still in there, but I've had some plants and some snails in there. There was a time last summer where it entirely dried up, and then it actually got kind of close kind of recently, as I, just due to being busy, didn't do any water change. But yeah, having just done some water changes, filled it up to where it is. But it does have a slight leak in it, so that's why it's out here. I kind of thought maybe I'd reseal it, but I'm just gonna leave it out here. And I think this winter I'm kind of thinking I'll put a heater in here and let it run through the winter, because I can't do outside summer tubs or anything here, because I live in the Mojave Desert, and it's well, it's been the last week or so, it's been like 115 as it was approaching that today, and you know, blazing hot, so can't do summer tubs like some people can. But I think I'm going to try putting fish in here and letting it run through the winter. So, I mean, that's in the future, so if I'm able to do that, I will show that, but let's go back to the 40 gallon. Yeah, so when I moved, I drained the 30 gallon all the way down as much as I could siphon out, and like the fish that were in there, I took them all out and put them in different other tanks that I have, like 10 gallons, so that I could carry with water still in it, you know, a few inches. Where this one I had to drain as much as I could. So it was really just the substrate and mud and like plants and stuff. I found the Anubias and some of the original plants that were still in here. The Mopani wood. The Anubias is attached to Mopani wood. And yeah, so all the fish I had taken out, put in different tanks, and then after getting this set up and upgrading and taking all the substrate out of the 30 gallon, putting in here, and there was a lot of shrimp that I had at the time that still lived in like the mud puddle. And I do remember when I was taking all the fish out of the 30 gallon, there was one fish that I couldn't catch, and that is it. So it was maybe about the size of that, or smaller even. It was one of the last fry born in the 30 gallon. If I couldn't catch it, I just assumed it died. It was just in the puddle of mud. Wasn't even sure if the shrimp would survive. But then I was scooping out through the mud that was just completely couldn't see into, and you know, it was just like substrate and gunk, just like a little layer of water. And somehow it lived in that for nearly a month before I moved over, got the 40 gallon and kind of transferred everything over. So that was pretty miraculous. And I do think that does have Marigold Variatus genes mixed with likely a gold Mickey Mouse Platy, and that's where it gets that from, but yeah. And then she likely had some babies in here, so some of the others might be descendants too. But then after the move, the majority of the fish in here were red tail Dalmatian platies that I had in a 10 gallon after the move. Moved them in here, and don't even have any of those originals, like original strains of them. All of these are their descendants that are mutts with, I think, blue Mickey Mouse platies, because they do kind of have most of them have a blue shine, and then the Mickey Mouse pattern blended into their Dalmatian spots. And there's swordtails in here. When I had the 30 gallon, I never had any swordtails in here. It wasn't until the 29 gallon that swordtail population took off that I decided to throw some in here. There is a neon dwarf gourami right there. That's not the original. It was a little while after the original plan of platies, guppies, corridors, and neon tetras that I decided to get a gourami. And I've gone through several. That might be, I don't know, I'd guess maybe the 5th. Yeah, they're cool. I like that as the fish in the mix here. And there's Siamese algae eaters. So there was a time I had blackbeard algae issues back when it was a 30 gallon until I got Siamese algae eaters, and that went away. And then had some issues with it in here even after adding Siamese algae eaters, when it was like so dense with Java moss until I pulled some out. It was until after that, and then they started clearing it up. So I don't mind it as the Java moss out of control as much like this if it's not covered in blackbeard algae. But I do need to at some point pull some of that out. But yeah. So yeah, just a lot of rambling. Just wanted to make a video that it was 6 years ago that I got my first fish. And a lot has changed with my hobby since then. Then it was just the 30 gallon and the 10 gallon. The original quarantine tank, 10 gallon, and the 30 gallon. And now I have like 20 tanks. And like thousands of fish when I here I'm remembering buying the very first 3. Yeah, I do enjoy this hobby. So it's been 6 years, and I hope it'll be 60 more, because I want to do this for a long time. Alright, well, that's it for now. And remember, I'm Jeff, and I enjoy fishies. Thanks for watching.